of ore that could come out of the ground there in a certain amount of time. So that's another thing that I'm concerned about for the state of Alaska, because what I would like to do is start a permanent fund off the gold, so that not only will they get permanent fund from oil royalties, they also will get permanent fund from every aspect of every opportunity we have coming out of the ground, whether it be coal, copper, gold, what have you. Thank you.
And Mike Dunleavy, your stand, please, on the Pebble Mine.
I think it should be allowed to go through the study process. We don't know what the study process will say at the end. The study process may end up saying this is not a good mine out in Bristol Bay. But if we don't follow a study process, then we politicize the process. And the fear is that we'll do this with other projects. And then again, that adds to Alaska's instability in terms of investors when they're looking for a place to invest in a mining operation in the state of Alaska. So I think it needs to be allowed to go through the process. Let's see what the study process says, and then we can have a discussion after that.
And leapfrogging back to Mr. Treadwell on the Pebble Mine meeting.
So Merrill, you asked us not to attack other candidates, but you know, Mark Begich isn't here and Bill Walker's not here. Both of them proposed taking due process away from an investor we've invited to come to Alaska and a governor who's willing to take away due process for politics is a governor who might take your parental rights, your property rights, your gun rights. It's no way to behave if you've sworn to uphold the Constitution. And it disgusted me. I have permitted mines in this state. I helped permit Fort Knox when I was at DEC, one of the largest employers in Fairbanks. And there was actually a mine during that time that didn't get permitted called the AJ down in Juneau. We have a fair permitting process here, and we'll work with it. And when there's improvements to technology, let's work with that as well. The new Pebble Mine proposal actually proposes a lot of development here on the Kenai Peninsula. I hope that people get involved in the process, work it very carefully, and I will not trade one resource for another when it comes to be the decision maker.
Okay, thank you. And Mike Dunleavy, you'll be up next on this question, first next on this question. For 2 consecutive years, the state of Alaska has adopted a minimal investment approach to its capital budget, only including enough to meet the minimum state match for federal funding. As deferred maintenance continues to be neglected, how will the state address its infrastructure needs moving forward?
You're going to hear a theme over and over again. You have to contain that operating budget, because the operating budget is the enemy of the capital budget. We've used our capital monies, what could have been capital monies, to pay for an escalating operating budget. Contain that operating budget once again to about $4.1 to $4.3 billion. Keep it contained to 2% growth. If you do that, when we get more revenue into the revenue stream into the system, we can use that money for our capital projects. I propose the minimum of $200 to $300 million in a capital project moving forward, and hopefully can build that up when we get new revenues in from the slope. But we have to have a continual exploration and development process here in the state for new oil finds, new mining plays, etc. We have to be a partner in that. The way you're going to do that is ramp down that operating budget, contain it, then you'll have a capital budget to grow Alaska.
Thank you, Mr. Sheldon. On the capital budget that's been neglected, how do you address infrastructure needs moving forward?
Yeah, I propose a $935 million infrastructure, because this state really needs, we're really falling behind. Also a 10% cut, like I said before, we're dropping the CVR fund at 81% that covers the umbrella of the state of Alaska. I think that what we should do is we should get these refineries and what have you on tribal land, because all the red tape has been done. If you all can remember ANCSA in 1971, when Senator Stevens was our senator, how fast did the Alaska pipeline, how fast did that paperwork get through the Alaska pipeline? It was like overnight. We can do the same thing with the tribal government. Being that I'm a native of Alaska, I should be able to bridge the gap between those two areas. We'll give incentives to the tribal governments as we use their land, and we can get infrastructure in here, refineries and what have you. I think it's important for the state, because we need refineries best. We can service the people first with low fuel, low gas, low stove oil, kerosene, what have you. The state of Alaska is being neglected. We're sending our fuel down south, and we need to export rather than import.
Thank you very much. And the question on the capital budget, Mr. Treadwell, and moving forward to repair infrastructure.
This question was asked yesterday in Fairbanks, and I said that we need a capital budget of at least $500 million a year and growing. But let's look at the kind of capital we're trying to assemble in Alaska. ConocoPhillips president told me the other day that we need $13 billion to be won in boardrooms around the world to drill out and put the oil in the pipeline that's been discovered. We know we've got a $43 billion gas project ahead of us. We know that if we can get the Coast Guard to spend a couple of $1 billion on icebreakers and we can build home ports in Alaska, we can be part of a $1 billion ship service industry in the Arctic. We know that we have a marine highway system that is decrepit. Our state does run on capital. Jobs grow because people invest here, and we have to be forming capital constantly. I'll grow the capital budget by one, recycling capital. We have projects the state has paid for that others now will buy from us. The state might have been in it to get started. The second thing is I will look for more public-private partnerships. And the third thing is we will grow the capital budget directly in the state and match federal funds and do more. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sheldon, you'll be first to go on this next one. Money, 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 money. Sales tax, income tax, or go ahead and address the budget, but do you want to have either a sales tax or an income tax, or neither?
No, we don't need a state tax. I think we've already got a burden on the people already. I think a sales tax would be good to a certain extent, but not an income tax. How in the world is our state going to be able to figure out how to do an income tax without goofing it all up? Now, the federal government, they've got an income tax that they're going to tune down to a one-pager, a 1041-pager. That's what we need. So no, absolutely not. We can build the state of Alaska's economy, and we don't need an income tax. Why would we do such a thing like that? It's important that we turn the direction of economy building for the people of the state, building businesses, getting people into private business ownership of the state. I think we can make a huge turnaround, and it'd be a blessing to go that direction than to tax and burden the people, because it's not right. Government needs to downsize. That's the most important thing under our administration. Thank you.
Thank you. And me, Treadwell, sales tax, income tax, or don't need either?
Neither. And I am a founder of Alaskans for Tax Reform. I signed the tax pledge, and I've got many other legislators, others running for office to sign that pledge. We have a sales tax that's up to municipalities, and I think we should not be taking from municipalities revenue here, because that leaves it back on property owners. I will say this: I won't propose a seafood tax. I won't propose raising the motor fuel tax. I won't propose any of the 10 taxes that Bill Walker has proposed, and this other one lurking around, which is a brand new oil tax called a carbon tax, that he says he didn't support. We were in a debate earlier, but his lieutenant governor has been running around the East Coast showing that we are politically with it, politically correct by supporting a carbon tax. It makes no sense for a state that's known for cold, dark, and distance.
Thank you. And Mr. Dunleavy, sales tax, income tax, or neither?
We don't need a tax. Again, the issue is the operating budget. All fiscal plans fail if you don't contain the operating budget. And that's the issue that I think a lot of folks are not realizing or talking about. If you tax, just like when we took the PFD, what we're going to do is grow more programs. And as we grow more programs, it'll need more money, more permanent fund money, or more taxes. Ramp that operating budget down, keep its growth about 2% a year. You won't need a tax. We can grow ourselves out of this issue, get the fines, the 200,000 to 300,000 barrels up by the pipeline that were just discovered the last several years. We won't need a tax, folks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Treadwell, we'll put you up first this time. If elected governor, how will your administration address the increasingly important and strategic Arctic region? And what relevant experience do you have that prepares you to lead an Arctic state?
Well, thank you. I made my first trip across the Russian Arctic in 1981, my first trip across the Canadian Arctic in 1983. I was asked by President Bush to be a commissioner and then to chair the U.S. Arctic Research Commission at a time that most of the multi-year ice went out of the Arctic Ocean. Never in human history have we been given a new ocean. I brought 8 nations together representing our nation to have marine safety. I've been working, and I've testified more than any Alaskan, to help us get the icebreakers that Congress is now authorized and beginning to appropriate. I have been working to make sure that we understand that this for us is just like our international airports for us that employ 40,000 people. As this ocean opens up, we've got to be there first for marine safety and the food security of our people. And second, we have to be there to be part of the economy. Russia should not have a monopoly for the business reasons, and it would be awful for us as a country if Russia had a monopoly for national security reasons.
Thank you. And Mr. Sheldon, as governor, what would your administration do to address that increasingly important strategic Arctic region?
The Arctic region is really, really super important to us. You know, I worked up at the Alaska pipeline. I worked at Kensington Gold Mine, so I know what it's like when we take environmental impact studies and we put them to work in the field. When I worked up on the Alaska pipeline, we had barriers to protect from oil reaching into the lands that were protected. We had all sorts of different types of measures, and as we go out into the Arctic and we look at our resource availability, you know, I'm still up in the air about drilling oil in our waters because of what happened down in Mexico. We had that huge spill down there. It's, you know, human beings make mistakes, you know, it just happens. And we can't rely on computers to back us up because they make mistakes too. So that's something I'm going to have to leave out on the table and decide. But, you know, we got the largest state in the union. It's huge, all right? We got enough oil and resources on land. We don't really need to go out into the ocean and possibly pollute our waters. Thank you.
And Mike, when the Dunleavy administration do to address the increasingly important strategic Arctic region, and what experience do you bring to the table to prepare you for that?
I was going to make a joke and say the first thing I do is hire me, Treadwell, as my Arctic so when this election is over, I'd like to talk to you. I lived above the Arctic Circle. I actually had a zip code. That was my home. My wife was born and raised on the Kobuk River, which is above the Arctic Circle, village of Norvik. Kids were born up there, so I actually lived it. I didn't read about it. I didn't necessarily go to a symposium to learn about it. I actually lived about it, lived there, lived it for many, many years, worked with folks up there. But seriously, the Arctic is thawing, and we can have a discussion as to why, but we do have a tremendous opportunity, and I think we need to make sure we engage the federal government to wake them up to the fact that there are other countries going to be using the Arctic as a passageway across the top. And we just need to work very diligently with our coastal communities up north and start to make sure we have a plan in place to use those shipping lanes and use the resources that the thawing Arctic is going to unleash for us.
Thank you, Mike. Hold on to the microphone. You're up first on this one. Specifically, what's going to need to be done to further the AK LNG project and terminus in Nikiski?
In my opinion, we have to get private partners back into that project. There are a ton of questions surrounding that project, and we're not privy to a lot of that information because of confidentiality agreements. We're asked this question all the time, and I give the same answer. It's very difficult to say whether you can support a project when you don't have all the data, or at least the data that you need to be able to make intelligent decisions. The moment I'm elected governor, I will re-engage the major partners, the partners that left the project, and have a discussion with them to see what is the issue, how can we get them back into the project, and what are some things we can do as a state to make sure that this project, if it goes forward, is going to return $1 to Alaska. As my friend Click Bishop once said, there's no point in spending $65 billion for a $43 billion return. So we have to be very careful with this project.
Thank you very much. Me, Treadwell, we've been pipeline dreaming for 3 decades. What needs to be done to get this project built and some welding